Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, StarvHarv is at it again, and this time he's taking on the American Civil War. So I'm excited about this one. I should be able to decipher most of this, at least I'm hoping so. If you have not seen my reaction to StarvHarv's other videos, I've got a playlist of them. I'll pin that down in the comment section below so you can check it out. But also in the description of this video, I've got link to the original of this video so you can check StarvHarv out. If you like what he does, check out all his other videos. He's at just over 95,000 subscribers, so if we give him a little push, we can help get him over that 100,000 mark, which is a big deal for someone on YouTube. You get that silver play button, and it's just kind of it's a milestone that means a lot. I remember when I got mine, we were live streaming when we hit 100,000. It was such a big deal. I remember when my daughter got hers, and so hopefully we can help him get there as well. So let's go ahead and dive into badly translated American Civil War.
I translated a timeline of the American Civil War through languages with terrible translation quality. This was the result.
So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to decipher some of this. I'm not going to pause and break down everything he says, but we'll get a good laugh, but we'll also hopefully learn a few things along the way.
November the 6th, 1860.
Election
Abraham
day.
Lincoln was selected as the American president. Lincoln is the president of the country against the spread of the slave.
So the spread of the slave. The Republicans and Abraham Lincoln were not campaigning on eliminating slavery where it already existed. They were campaigning on not spreading it to new territories, which in the minds of the slave-owning aristocracy in the South was equal to the eventual death of slavery. So they weren't going to stand for it.
1961, on February the 4th, in Montgomery, Alabama, Montgomery organized the southern provinces of American composition.
That's the inauguration of Jefferson Davis as the provisional president of the Confederate States. Montgomery was the provisional capital because Virginia was not part of the Confederacy yet. It didn't secede for a couple of months after that.
The broadcaster, Montgomery, agrees that Jefferson Davis is the mid-president of the United States of America. April 12th, fire staff building Fort Sumter, South Carolina.
Confederates fire in Fort Sumter about 4:30 in the morning. PGT Beauregard is in command. The first battery is one, I think it's at Fort Johnson, which is on the land side. It's actually really close to Fort Sumter. If you go to Fort Sumter, you can see that spot really well. And that's when it all began.
The Civil War is official. On April the 15th, President Lincoln will present a public statement about the elevation and ask 75,000 milliseconds to stop the elevation.
So under the law at that time, the president by law could only call up a maximum of 75,000 volunteers. And he could only call them up, I believe, for 3 months. And so that's what he does until Congress passes bills authorizing him to do more. That's the most he can do.
Lincoln joins 43,000 volunteers on May the 3rd to increase the number everyday teams. May the 24th, American power is transferred to the Potomac River and the miracle of Robert E.I. Portuguese Elmer Ellsworth.
Portuguese Elmer Ellsworth. Elmer Ellsworth is the first Union officer to die. So right across the river, the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. is Arlington, Virginia, which is where Robert E. Lee's home is. And there's a Confederate flag flying over, I think it's a hotel, that they can see from Washington. And so Elmer Ellsworth takes a detachment of soldiers across the river. They go up, they climb up and cut the flag down, and Ellsworth is coming back down the steps of the hotel carrying this flag when the hotel owner shoots and kills him. The soldiers immediately kill the hotel owner, but this is a big deal because the Lincoln family knew Ellsworth. And if you look at the 1870 census, you'll see a lot of families who had kids born 61, 62, who named them Elmer Ellsworth. So if your last name was Johnson, you had a son named Elmer Ellsworth Johnson. It was a really common thing that people did.
11-kilometer owner of Mars Order House was a foot commander in New York City and friend of Lincoln. He's still removing the candy flag from the room.
So that probably still refers to the Elmer Ellsworth situation, removing the flag.
That's it. That's what he's doing in the Civil War. He's just getting rid of this candy flag. Get out of here. Ellsworth is the first American official to celebrate the war. Yeah, this rocks. Late May, Richmond is a profession. Richmond was the second place in the Amalgambia and the most
The
industrialized-
Amalgambia. He like mixed the Confederate flag and the Gambian flag there. That was cool. So this is when Richmond becomes the second capital of the Confederacy.
June the 3rd, the first disaster in the east of the United States, and the Federal Army in the west of Virginia.
So I'm thinking this has probably got to be the Battle of Philippi, which is the first kind of skirmish of the war. It takes place in West Virginia, which Western Virginia at that time, because West Virginia doesn't exist yet.
The Great Battle Al, the first battle in the world in Virginia. June the 20th, at the end of the Bicycle Convention, Northwest Virginia
Con.
was isolated from Western Virginia. June, West Virginia, official design and accepted of 35. So not only did Virginia split into West Virginia and Virginia, Northwest Virginia was like, screw this whole West Virginia thing.
We'll take
July
them.
the 21st, Bull Battle, the first written.
First Battle of Bull Run, or as the Confederates called it, first battle, well, just would have been the Battle of Bull Run, the Battle of Manassas, until there was a second one.
Close to the Virginia Manamedia, the United Nations Organization, McDowell weapons forced to protect Washington.
Irvin McDowell was the commander of the Union Army that lost that
July
battle.
1861, North Korea, a series of global works and technology forces from Washington, D.C. August the 10th, after the death of the disaster in Lyon,
In
the army
Lyon.
has withdrawn from the
Nathaniel Lyon is a Union general who is killed in battle out in the Western Theater. So I'm guessing that's what they're talking about, because that's how his name was spelled, was Lyon.
Federal attack. The facts of the American leader highlight the strong confession of the Mississippi River. October the 21st, Battle of Ball's Bluff. Edward D. Baker, President of Oregon, President of Lincoln, and his friend led
So Edward Baker was a senator who was a friend of the Lincoln family, so much so that in years past, Abraham Lincoln had a son. They named him Eddie, but his name was Edward Baker Lincoln. And Edward Baker was in the Union Army, and he was killed at the Battle of Ball's Bluff, which is, it's actually kind of northwest of Washington, D.C., and it's right up against the Potomac River there.
the army back to the Potomac River, forced to return to the river. Ice water in the river was destroyed by many drawings of the archipelago. There's too many drawings. Stop drawing! And then they fall into the water. 1862, February the 16th. Donelson, Tennessee. The river left the river under heavy control.
Wow, where'd all the... Holy cow, that's kind of cool that he showed that like that with no water. Fort Donelson Falls on the Cumberland River.
Not fun. Unconditional monitoring. February the 22nd, Jefferson Davis was the president of the United States. He's like, I'm changing team.
So I think this is probably when he gets elected to a full, I want to say 5 years. Did they do 5 years? It was more than 4 term as president of the Confederacy. Up until then, he had been provisional. And so now they're electing a actual kind of permanent government. And so, for example, John Tyler gets elected to the Confederate Congress, but he never takes his seat because he dies in 1862.
March the 7th to the 8th. Battle of Pea Ridge.
It's PEA, Ridge.
The American victory interrupted the administration of the Missouri River. Relaxing in Missouri.
The control of rivers is everything at this time because, number one, it's how you transport supplies, but it's also how you can transport troops. The fall of Fort Donelson in and of itself doesn't mean a whole lot, but it allowed the Union then to have access to the rest of the river, which allowed them to take Nashville. So Fort Donelson was not just protecting the river, it was protecting the capital city that was also on the river down further, and it had to be evacuated as soon as they lost the fort. Control of the Mississippi, control of the ocean is everything in this war.
March the 8th. Customer service surveillance and marijuana, Virginia. The first Iron Gate. A battle on the Hampton Road on the Virginia coast. On March the 8th, Virginia destroys 2 wooden cabinets.
So, Battle of Hampton Roads is this is the CSS Virginia, often known as the Merrimack. It was known as the Merrimack because it had been a Union ship called the Merrimack that had been scuttled, and the Confederates raised it and put armor plating on it and turned it into the CSS Virginia. These were not the first ironclad warships in history, but they were the first to fight against each other, the first to see combat. There had been ships already made in Europe. I think the French might have had the first one. But the Monitor and the Merrimack fight each other. The Merrimack, the Virginia, had sunk a couple of Union wooden ships the day before.
Crossed the line. Okay, it's war. On March the 9th, the USS and 2 classes of iron battles and many other injuries were monitored. April the 6th,
were monitored.
Tennessee's first battle. The
Shiloh.
first day of the fight is considered the first day of Albert Sidney Johnston's battle, the Veterinary of Independence and the Mexican War.
So he's a veteran of the Texas War for Independence and of the Mexican War. Albert Sidney Johnston is mortally wounded. Oh, really, he's just killed. He dies like within 10 or 20 minutes of being mortally wounded. Probably friendly fire. Highest ranking officer on either side to die during the war. And he was one of, I think, only 2 field commanders during the American Civil War who had been generals before the war started. Most of these guys are like captains and lieutenants and maybe even a few colonels. He had been Robert E. Lee's superior officer. Lee was a lieutenant colonel under Albert Sidney Johnston as a colonel right before the war started. But Albert Sidney Johnston and Joe Johnston had both been generals before the war started.
The Alliance winning is no longer available in Ulysses S. Ulysses S. April the 24th, Alliance warship David
Farragut
delivered a conference shield to the mouth of the Mississippi River. Fleet arrived on April the 25th. In 2 days, the fortress falls with Alliance power.
So I'm guessing we're talking about them running the forts, Fort Jackson and St. Philip, on the Mississippi River, which then allows the Navy to take New Orleans, which is by far the largest city in the Confederacy.
And the mouth of the Great River is under the control of the United States. May the 25th, Virginia's first battle. 2 weeks of maneuvering and fighting Cross Keys and the Royal Front.
So Front Royal and Cross Keys are 2 battles during the Shenandoah Valley campaign. Stonewall Jackson's making a name for himself.
Comparative group Stonewall Jackson attacks U.S. power with Winchester.
Winchester is the city that kind of controls the northern entrance to the Shenandoah Valley, changes hands dozens of times during the war.
And will succeed with the city. May the 31st, Fight Week, commander of Virginia's merger, Robert E. Lee, turned the recovery to change his name to North Virginia.
So, Joe Johnston is wounded, 7 Pines, I think, and Robert E. Lee, who's an advisor to Jefferson Davis, takes command of what is then called the Army of the Potomac for the Confederates, and he renames it the Army of Northern Virginia. And they're fighting the 7 Days battles.
New Virginia again. Except from, that's just Robert E. Lee. June the 6th. Memphis, Tennessee, local Charles Davis's American Fruit Exhibition was successfully defeated by the Mississippi River and Memphis. July the 17th, President. This statutory act can increase the requirements of the previous legislation of sugar products, allowing extensive bucking of ownership of confectionery products, and preventing slave recognition and slave release. August the 30th, Second Bull Battle.
Second Battle, Bull Run.
Means the Second Manassas.
Second Manassas.
December the 24th, Jefferson Davis writes a warranty statement to the American Benjamin Butler that is forbidden to treat the privates of New Orleans.
So, Benjamin Butler is the Union general who's in command of the troops occupying New Orleans. He's a political general. He's not a guy with a military background all his life. He's a war Democrat, which are things that Lincoln highly valued, having war Democrats that supported the war effort. And the Union troops are being treated badly. For example, women would dump their chamber pots on Union troops from their window. And so Benjamin Butler issues this very controversial order, which basically says we're going to treat these women like women of the town. That did not mean, contrary to what some lost causers will tell you, that they were giving Union soldiers permission to attack or seriously abuse these women. It meant that they would arrest them and they would charge them with crimes and they would treat them with no respect. It didn't give them the right to physically or otherwise, you know what I mean, abuse them in some way. but it was very controversial. And to this day, you can see chamber pots that were made during that time that have Benjamin Butler's face on them.
In this profession, there is a declaration that the declaration must be sent to the individual states, not as a black American military soldier or white officers are treated as the end of the war, which is designed by Lincoln, Judge the War.
So Lincoln, in the aftermath of the Battle of Antietam in September of 1862, he announces a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation that will take effect on January 1st of 1863. I think in December then he issues the final wording of that, but it had been announced back in September.
1863, July the 1st, the search process was a war action that repeated itself as free,
This is Emancipation.
emphasizing the black team and clearing Southern white. This announcement was an important circular point in the US war, and in possible changes in order to rebuild the UN was a better union without condemnation. April 1863, Eastern Alliance launched a new campaign in Virginia. So Le North Villengia is sold in Fredericksburg. The Federal Army launched a campaign in Vicksburg,
the Vicksburg campaign, and then over in Fredericksburg you have the beginning stages of what will become the Battle of Chancellorsville.
Confession to the Mississippi River. May the 1st, the Association Parliament accepts the Retell team of Emerson Davis. This law believes that the judge is Tantal for the rebellion of slaves. The Black Army and the Black Teeth are sent to the country, which is ended or loved. One of the two. May the 6th, campsite plan is dismantled and EU forces are being withdrawn. Win Lee in Chancellorsville, a great sacrifice will be destroyed, including the Stonewall Seabait Def Jackson on May the 10th.
So you would have loved Sid Meier's Civilization 5. So Stonewall Jackson is shot in the arm and in the hand by his own men. Friendly fire seems to be a problem with the Confederates. Same thing will happen to James Longstreet a year later at roughly the same spot. He'll be severely wounded by friendly fire. But Jackson had to have his arm amputated. He survives the amputation but dies of complications, probably pneumonia.
After Lee Jefferson asked Davis to take the war from Virginia, June the 9th,
Gettysburg.
the Battle of Brandy Station boat riding America crosses the Rapidan River.
The Rapidan River. Battle of Brandy Station is a big cavalry battle at the beginning stages of what becomes the Gettysburg campaign.
And discovering that Lee people are going to the Shenandoah Valley.
Shenandoah Valley
became a descendant of the city as Vicksburg Alliance attack suffers from bomb attacks. The Mississippi River's being up to a lot. I mean, I know it's important in the Civil War, but it's got a lot of confessions. June the 14th, Battle of Second Winchester. Protection of the EU Army under the Robert Mill Army and Shenandoah Federal Valley. June the 28th, Gettysburg campaign continues. Confirmation passes through York. But
York is a town east of Gettysburg. You have York and Lancaster counties right next to each other in southern Pennsylvania there.
Federal Republic of the Bridge on fire and refused access to Oriental Beach. Sylviana has fallen. Billions must die. July the 30th, Lincoln...
We just skipped right over the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm a little disappointed. And the surrender of Vicksburg.
Public Order of 252. Responding to the refusal to treat a black soldier as a white soldier. Replacement dental systems were effectively disabled.
So the Confederates, you see this kind of played out in the movie Glory. The Confederate Congress passes a proclamation that basically says, because the Union is starting to enlist black soldiers now at the federal level. There had been like state units, especially out west, Louisiana, Kansas, Mississippi, where soldiers had been put in uniform, but they were mainly doing manual labor and things like that. But now you've got like the 54th Massachusetts has been raised as a federal, it's going to be in the federal army. And the Confederate Congress issues this proclamation that basically says, if we capture capture blacks fighting against the Confederacy, they're going to be returned to slavery. If we capture blacks in federal uniform or white officers in command of black troops in uniform, they'll be summarily executed. And so then the Union responds and says, if you do it, for every one of yours, one that you do that to of our soldiers, we're going to do the same thing to Confederate soldiers.
Damn. August the 21st. No, Lawrence. William Bake Kintrail in the storm of the Day Killers.
William Clark Quantrill was actually from Ohio. He's buried in Dover, here in northeast Ohio, or at least parts of them are. They burned Lawrence, Kansas. It's pretty ugly. You have kind of on the frontier there in places like Missouri and Kansas, you have very much guerrilla warfare going on.
Rivals. Missouri Guerrilla attack and destroy
Guerrilla.
most cities. Not Missouri Guerrilla. Around 150 men and boys killed. September the 9th. He was saved by a moderate campus in Tennessee and immediately stopped North Georgia. September the 19th. The Army of
Chickamauga.
the United States of Cumberland was arrested during the leadership of William Rosecrans.
William Rosecrans is a command of the Union Army of the Cumberland, defeated at the Battle of Chickamauga, second bloodiest battle of the war after Gettysburg.
December the 8th. If Lincoln promises the United States, you will be able to squeeze the people who participated in the out and issue a statement on the uniform and Reconstruction.
So the Union now is starting to see that they're going to probably win this war. Lincoln's going to make Grant commander-in-chief of all Union armies in a couple of months. And so now, just like what you see in World War II, where you have conferences with the Allied powers where they start to think about the post-war world, the Republicans and Abraham Lincoln, Republicans in Congress and Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet are starting to think through what the post-war United States is going to look like.
1864, on February the 9th, 109 U.S. officers will run the news and fight the war.
Union rules, Confederacy sucks. Dixieland, well, you can read it for yourself.
8 flights took place in 2 bays. February the 27th, Camp Sumter Prison is known as Andersonville Prison Camp in Georgia.
I was going to say that's actually right. The prison camp we call Andersonville was in Andersonville, but it's known as Camp Sumter.
Camp is famous for extreme tooth conditions and high
I'm sure that was a problem.
Equality between teeth. February the 17th, the first successful assault of the Civil War. In 1995, Hungary defeated and did not listen until the attack was out. April the 9th, Battle of Pleasure Hill in Louisiana. The U.S. Army was defeated by Richard Taylor Total.
Richard Taylor is the son of former President Zachary Taylor.
April the 12th, after rushing in the Fort Pillow downtown and West Tennessee, the Parliament rejected something bad but examined the store. Fort Pillow keeps emotional problems in the rest of the war stolen by Forrest reputation.
So Nathan Bedford Forrest, there's something known as the Fort Pillow Massacre. There's a lot of debate about exactly what went down. There were black soldiers that were, the Union said, killed after they surrendered. Forrest and the Confederates argued, well, the reason we killed them is because they hadn't actually surrendered. We asked them to surrender and they didn't. So it kind of is a gray area, but there were definitely soldiers that were wounded and unarmed that were killed. But nobody was ever really brought to trial or anything for that, unlike some other incidents like the Saltville Massacre, where you had Union soldiers in hospitals that were pulled out of their hospital beds and shot on the ground outside. That guy, Champ Ferguson, was actually executed.
14th, the Sherman Champion of Johnson is blocked by Tennessee. Sherman takes precautionary measures that do not order additional Arabic. June the 15th, attack in St. Petersburg, Virginia.
St. Petersburg.
After leaving the Cold Port, Potomac
Cold Harbor.
passed the arm of James River, and his army attacked the outer defense of St. Petersburg. After 4 days of blood, environmental spending contributions tends to isolate the city. Since July the 2nd, an army named Johnson, a great discreet defense and a little keen after several weeks of maneuvering and fighting. Johnson has been threatened by Shaman Mobile.
Shaman Mobile Powers. I love that image of General Sherman. So we're getting into the Atlanta campaign now. The Battle of Atlanta is going to be fought in July of 1864. It's going to eventually result in the fall of Atlanta soon
the
after.
mobile service if you do magic. July the 17th, I'd like to thank Joseph Johnson Belaford Center for the Tennessee Army. Big shout out there. July the 21st, Battle of Atlanta. Second food, according to Sherman. Reduces the strength of the alliance and gives significant losses without positive results.
And unfortunately for the Union, it's the one time a Union Army commander is killed during the war, James McPherson, an Ohioan who I'm convinced would have been president, and other people said the same thing. There were other high-ranking generals at the time that he died who said the guy would have been president someday if he had lived.
July the 30th, the Alliance Army was placed a big mine in the neighboring St. Petersburg.
The crater.
The following dogs can be cancelled, and the American Army and the Cradle will remain unchanged. August the 5th, Mobile Bay Admiral David Farragut is an American fleet. To protect its mobile phone, Alabama Mobile covers and protects them from strong fortifications and the Southern Flotilla.
Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
August the 31st, Kath Jones Creek, Georgia. Don't know what I do. September the 1st, food evacuated Atlanta, Georgia. Sherman camps the city's army and protects the next area.
So Atlanta's not even the biggest city in Georgia. It's certainly not one of the largest cities in the Confederacy, but it's a rail hub, and rail hubs, along with rivers, are everything in this war. It's how you move supplies. It's how you move troops quickly. It makes a huge difference in an increasingly industrialized war.
September the 29th, the amalgamation is trying to...
Oh no, not the amalgamation.
October the 19th, the Battle of Cedar Creek.
Cedar
Virginia.
Creek.
I've surprised the early morning attack. I've successfully attacked Jubalt, and I'm excited
Jubal early.
by Shendon's army from Cedar Creek's bank in Virginia. At the end of the day, the drawing is placed on the flight. November the 8th, Abraham Lincoln is the President of the United States.
He's reelected in an election, ends up being an electoral landslide over George McClellan, who is the former general, who's the Democratic nominee, and his running mate was George Pendleton of Ohio, whose grandfather was Nathaniel Pendleton. If you're familiar with the story of the Burr-Hamilton duel in 1804, Nathaniel Pendleton was Alexander Hamilton's second.
Mentioned. December the 10th, 1864. The cookie settings on this website are set to allow cookies to provide the best browsing experience possible. If you continue to use this website without changing cookie settings or clicking accept below, you agree to this. The Savannah Army will power an amalgamated defender to take Fort Magalt and find the city.
Sherman does the march to the sea, burning and kind of just destroying everything in their path between Atlanta and Savannah. And he sends a message to Abraham Lincoln because he basically goes out of contact. He cuts loose from his supply and communications lines. So Lincoln knows the plan is to march from Atlanta to Savannah, but he has no regular contact with Sherman and Sherman's multiple armies that he's commanding. And so until he hears from Sherman when Sherman gets to Savannah, and he tells him he's presenting to Lincoln as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah, that's when Lincoln knows it's been successful.
Huge robot law. February the 1st, 1865, Sherman Savannah's army departs to pass Carolina. February the 17th, the end ends. South Carolina and Confederate Sea Defender evacuated
Charleston Falls, the city that started it all. The place where secession began.
Carolina. February the 22nd, on the same day, Joseph E. Johnson ordered the Tennessee Army and ordered the deputy John B. Food.
John Bell Hood. He missed an opportunity here. He puts John B. Gordon in the hot dog image there. That's the face of John B. Gordon, but he should have put John Bell Hood there.
March the 4th, Lincoln, the second president.
He's sworn in for a second term.
Who was the first?
And listen, I love the Gettysburg Address. The Gettysburg Address is an amazing speech. It's beautiful, and it is properly praised for what it is. But honestly, my favorite Lincoln speech is his second inaugural address. That's the one where he says, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right." And he talks about binding up the nation's wounds and caring for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and bringing peace not only among ourselves but with all nations. And if you go to the Lincoln Memorial, there are two speeches on the walls. One is the Gettysburg Address, the other one's his second inaugural.
March the 16th and the 19th, Sherman's army stopped the northern leadership of Fayette.
Kind of the last major battle in the southern, in what we call the Western Theater, although by this point they're really about as far east as Grant's army is.
He managed to avoid the power that was given in Lyrie. April the 1st, the Five Fork Conference version of Virginia will start deciding that the Lee champion will leave the siege line from St. Petersburg.
The siege line, so Battle of Five Forks is a disaster for the Confederates, and at this point Lee really has just barely an army.
April the 2nd, St. Petersburg General Terms and Conditions. April the 3rd, the U.S. Army is from Richmond. Damn, this whole time. April the 6th, the Battle of the Seamen, Virginia. A part of the old town on the beach is engraved and true. April the 14th, President John Wilkes Booth, Fort Sumner, USA, and South Carolina are the same day. That's how you become the president, you just kill the other one. April the 15th, Andrew Johnson was the president of the United States. April the 26th, Joseph Johnson signed a document to hand over the Army and the Army of Tennessee at an Army conference.
Yeah, people forget that the surrender at Appomattox is not the end of the war. You've still got other armies in the field. Even after Johnston surrenders to Sherman, you've still got armies in the field. You've got Richard Taylor out west. You've got some smaller forces kind of moving around.
May the 12th, ranch is held in Palmito Ranch in Okayama Prefecture,
Oklahoma.
Contact now. And April the 26th, 1865.
May 26th.
Simon Bolivar Booker agrees that the Trans-Mississippi Army will be transferred to...
That's actually what the army... It was called the Trans-Mississippi Theater because it was on across the Mississippi.
Trans-Mississippi Army on June the 2nd, 1865. The last major missile will officially be transferred to Civil War.
All right, that was fun. You can tell that's obviously a topic I know a lot about, so I had plenty to say, but it's always just entertaining to see how that all plays out. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope maybe you learned something you didn't know already. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and check out my pinned comment below with the playlist of all the other StarvHarv reaction videos that we've done. And if you haven't already, if you like him and you want to see him continue to do this, head over and subscribe so we can get him over 100,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching.